continue. And so, yes, today it's really exciting because we had mentioned a few weeks ago about intergenerational conversation. But there are two key points I want to bring up. One is the fact that the whole conversation around which generation do you belong really speaks to a prism, right? A prism through which each and every one of us views life. Therefore, the second point, therefore, is this intergenerations. How is there a seamless handshake, or is it a forced handshake? Now, the third point then is what remains consistent or what remains universal across all these 5 generations that we're talking about. So, Daddy, you've heard my talk about the intergenerational conversation. How does it ring with you?
Earlier on in my life, we didn't have this kind of opportunity. That's one generational difference between now and then.
Yes.
One of the areas I was very, very good at was calculating what would be required to roof a house. Materials.
How the difficulty that other generations experience in doing certain things, whilst on the face of it may seem much more difficult than what some other generations experience, but in practice the difficulty may be the same. So his own difficulty in walking a kilometer to fetch water, whilst that sounds dramatic, may be the same difficulty I experience when I don't have internet access.
Oh yeah, oh wow, right?
And he's laughing because he doesn't agree. But in terms of the feeling, the difficulty could be perceived as the same.
The same trauma.
The same trauma. Teaching, lecturing, academia, it's a labor of love. They say a teacher's reward is in heaven. I wanted some reward
here as well.
I think my passion for teaching was already there. And I knew I wanted to pursue it, and I knew I wanted to explore it.
But you were not going to just wait for money to come.
No.
Okay. So that is also another intergenerational conversation.
Yes.
But like I said to us at the beginning, that this was not going to be a one-episode show. And we would be back again to continue this particular intergenerational conversation, because you can see we're just getting ready to get into it. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Never an Afterthought show. My name remains Afolabi Imoukhuede. I'm the author of the book, the Never an Afterthought book, and also the anchor of this show, the Never an Afterthought show. It's my pleasure always to welcome you, even to join us, and that you welcome us into your homes. Thank you for taking the time out. I hope that you're keeping safe. I hope that you're keeping well. And above all, that you're also applying all that we learn together on this show for you to win. This show, it's about you winning. It's not about anything else. This show is not about us. It's about each and every one of us, which is you. This show is about you, and anything and everything that we do or that you do to win is what we are particular about on this show. As you also know, for those of you who have followed us on this show, who have subscribed, or who are literally our viewers, you know that we curate this show every episode for you. From the beginning of this year, we've been talking about investing in you. That's how we started in the Q1 of this year. We've taken journeys from talking about investing in our career, what you need to do to win or to land those big jobs, even to side hustles, to entrepreneurship. And now we started a series of conversations that we called Intergenerational Conversations. Now, that is so important because those of you who, if you're just joining us today, please, you need to go watch last week's episode because today's episode is a continuation of last week's episode. And why do I say that? Amongst the nuggets, the wisdom nuggets that we got last week, at least I got something about native intelligence, which is one of the things Daddy spoke about. Native intelligence is so important. And that's why we are having a conversation like this, because just listening to different generations speak about what worked for them, how it worked for them, you can pick something, from each and every of this conversation. So without much further ado, we're going to jump into it, but let's not forget our hashtag, the Never an Afterthought hashtag. That's how you join, and that's also how we continue our conversations, because our conversations not only last when the show lasts. The conversations begin before the show. The show comes in. We have conversations during the show, and surely we have conversations after the show. So that's why we talk about the hashtag Never an Afterthought, and you can use that hashtag across Twitter, NAA_book, Facebook and Instagram at NA Afterthought. And clearly, for those of you who like to write, I read from you. podcast@neveranafterthought.com is the email where you can drop me a note. We do glean your comments on the channels wherein you're listening or watching me. And of course, I recognize and I salute all those private audience that send me the WhatsApp and emails privately. So yes. So today, as you had seen, the production team had done a recap of last week's episode. On set, I have Daddy on my left, Professor Olu Aina, who represents the Traditionalist generation. And of course, I have my Buru on my right, that's Dr. Segun Aina. Well, maybe I should have corrected it. He told me that I should refer to Daddy as Baba Dr. Segun Aina, and he is Professor Olu Aina. so yes, I've got Daddy on my left and I've got Segun on my right, and yours truly representing, of course, Daddy representing the Traditionalist generation, Segun the Millennial generation, myself representing the Generation X. And I'd mentioned that we do have a few of our people, the men behind the camera representing the Gen Z. You will see them. They said they won't show their face until the end of this series. So you'll see a few of them representing Gen Z. And yes, I did say that those of you in baby boomers generation should show yourself. And I recognize my auntie that has shown her face that yes, I am baby boomers generation. That is Mrs. Felucia Samuel. Thank you, and many more that have shown their hands that yes, so we are here. So yes, without much further ado, we're going to go right in. I know you're used to a short break, but no, because of time, we're going to go right in, and then we will have a break right after. So Segun, before we before we wrapped up last episode, you were beginning to tell us about your own story. Yes. And I remember we logged out on the point where you said that they say do what you love. In other words, their own generation, under this generation, will say do what you love. Money will come after. And you say, okay, no, well, I'll do what I love, but money doesn't have to come after. So that's what defines you and your generation. So fire on.
So for me, it was a case of why pursue an academic career from which I would derive job satisfaction, and then wait for for money to come through means which I couldn't currently say at the time. And again, I was brought up to be a planning person. You have to have a plan, an immediate plan, a short-term plan, medium-term, long-term plan. So I looked at the rough sketch of a plan I had in my head, and I as they say, show me the money. I couldn't really see the money, but I still wanted to do what I wanted to do. So I decided to attempt to do something slightly unorthodox maybe not unorthodox in the grand scheme of things, but unorthodox compared to Prof's path. The moment I decided to do a PhD, I was kind of towing his line, even though in different fields, but towing the same line. So I looked at what I felt caused the delay. He always used to preach hard work, all the time hard work. And I'm a subscriber to the concept of hard work, but I also subscribe to smart work. And I think
you're speaking like a Gen Z now. Huh?
Well, yes, but if you're working smart enough, it actually looks like hard work. It is actually hard work to work smart, because there's a lot of creativity and thinking to do with it. So I decided to lean on a few other concepts.
But sorry, I just want you to say this, because what I've heard you say is not just hard work, but smart work, but that you are not.
It doesn't diminish. No.
So I think it's important for our audience.
It is very important. Yes, It is very important. There's no, as my dad always says, there's no shortcut to success. The path is just slightly different. There's no shortcut. Both of them are long cuts, but you just have to find the balance.
Yes.
Find the balance. In working very smart, it doesn't mean you need to work less hard. And in working very hard, it doesn't mean you need to work less smart. So it's being able to marry the two concepts. I then leaned on other concepts from books that I had read and things that I had studied that suggests, maybe not all the time accurately, but suggests that 20% of your reward comes from 80% of your effort, and 80% of your reward comes from 20% of your effort. So yes. So when you look at that 80-20 split, it then made me more confident in the fact that I don't necessarily need to sustain myself or have a plan for future sustenance from my core work or my core career path. And some of us are lucky to find ourselves in a career path that fulfills all those things in one: job satisfaction, economic security, and all the likes from one pot. Whereas in for some others, it's not the case. Now, this doesn't in any way speak to whether or not teachers are well paid or any of that. I think it just speaks to balancing my personal desires and aspirations against what was available. In any case, I see myself as an academic matter when I was saying earlier that I wanted to speak to the people in the middle. And in doing that, I knew I didn't want to lecture in a private university, because I feel that the students of a private university are already privileged in a sense. And I also, as a beneficiary of such a privilege, knew that those weren't really the guys that needed me the most. I felt I would best apply myself in a public institution. And we looked at the generational differences last week, where we were saying that public school in the time of Daddy was the better option, and private school in my own time seemed to be the better option. So I wanted to go back to that public school setting and bring in what they hoped to expect from a private institution, or the kind of pedigree they would expect from a private institution, into the public space. And even though public schools are still more renowned and more established, if you will, than private institutions, the pedigree of the people who find themselves there are perceived differently. And I say perceived because I don't speak to whether or not the people in private university are better or worse off than the people who are in public university. There's just a different perception about them. It's just like a public servant and a private sector person. They're equally, they could be equally good at their jobs, but different perspectives, different angles. So I wanted to come into that. So I realized very early on that I would like to end up in a public institution, and as God will have it, I found my way into Obafemi Awolowo University. Great
Prestigious, yeah.
Yes, Africa's most beautiful campus, Obaon University.
Exactly.
Greatest Gbagba and all that. And that pride that Ife has as an institution, from the students to the staff, OAU people are proud, and rightfully so. Unfortunately, not everything is as it should be, but OAU is a great institution, and it was a great privilege for me to find my way in there. And I started doing what I loved to do. But before that, I had to set the tone to make sure that I will really be content doing what I'm doing there and being there. So, again, possibly as a result of some kind of privilege or some kind of opportunity, I was able to put other things in place before going into the university. So I am now doing what I love without fear or favor and without distraction occasioned by other needs.
Economic challenges.
Intellectual stimulation elsewhere from a different strata and all of that. So I've been lucky. I must say that I must not also diminish myself by saying it is solely as a result of privilege or opportunity. Some of the things that I've gone on to do or I have done did not come down a very straight path. Some of them, for example, Prof is of the school of thought that if you want to do something, do it. Focus on it. Don't meddle with distractions. So some of the things I dabbled into or I dabble into, I have to do somewhat behind his back because I don't want him to see me as somebody who is not focused. And in his own generation of hard work, focus is one of the things that is a manifestation of hard work. You are not hardworking if you are not focused. If you are trying to do too many things at the same time, he says it all the time, you are not focused. You are running all over the place. But one of the characteristics of smart work in our own generation is being able to multitask. That's not being focused. We call it multitasking. So we are trying to multitask and do more than one thing at the same time. And that's kind of where I find myself now. Looking to the future, I'm hoping to make gains with time in terms of reaching hopefully his own level of achievement and even surpassing it, and doing so in record time as compared to him. So he's only just living his best life now at maybe in the last 10 years. I want to live my best life earlier than he had the opportunity to do. And it's ironic that they will talk about distractions, because when it was convenient for them, they manifested high levels of distraction. For example, we spoke earlier on about community living. Now in this our own generation, you want to have 2, 3, maximum maybe 4 kids.
4 kids is a lot.
4 kids is a lot.
No, 2 is
ideal. And in their own generation, they had 4, 5 children and 15 other nieces and nephews.
Living with their community living.
So in a sense, we could say that was him not being focused on what he was supposed to do. I never got to see him growing up. And it was a simple choice. Do you want to see me or you want to go to school? If you want to see me, I can sit at home with you, but you also be at home, no school for you. But if you want a good education and you want this and you want that, then I have to go out and make it happen. And I want to eat my cake and have it by being able to spend more time with my own family and do the things that I enjoy doing, not at the cost of anything else.
Well, again, but you see, before I switch to Daddy now, what you're also just describing also just tells us about what happens with tech and innovation across generations. So in Daddy's days, the multitasking that Daddy would have to do required him being on the road.
And physically present.
Physical presence, So, it was such that even if you wanted to, if you wrote a letter, you needed to get up to go to the post office to post it. Yes. As basic as that. If you wanted to go see someone, there was very limited food. You need to get up and go and see the person for what is even a 2-3 minutes conversation. In their days when they wrote journals as well, they need to physically get up to go to the library and do research, for the journal they're writing and all of that. So that explains, so in that way, that's some of their own hard work, right? But
it does.
A lot of what you now said maybe is a kind of eat your cake and have it. Perhaps not. It's technology that has also enabled some of that.
Definitely.
But Daddy, I want us to talk about the later years. You obviously have a story of a lot of firsts, and I didn't even know that the first also started from Oluremi. That you had told us the story of your nativity last week, but I read in your profile, your first at Abu Zaria, the Department of Vocational Education and Co. that you actually started, you founded, and also going on to first, to chair the board, the National Board for Technical Education. And I also see in your story how you were not just now talking what you hadn't practiced. You were a craftsman yourself. And how all of so I want to hear. I'm sure our audience will want to hear that bit of the story that we didn't get to last week, and then we'll then jump into some of the corollaries that have already begun to come out already. Yes, sir.
Well, when I got to Benin to start the National Business and Technical Exams Board, it was Dr. Oyegun was the governor of Edo State at that time. It took me to several facilities and finally took me to this facility at Ikpoba Hill and said, if you like this place, you can start the board there. I came armed with a letter from Professor Fafunwa introducing me to him.
He was the Minister of Education.
He was then the Minister of Education. Yeah. And I liked the general atmosphere, but I noticed the absence of craftsmanship, particularly in the buildings. And I know that there was no money, because the take-off grant that I was given was 150,000 naira.
In that time, what's that?
That was
about 1991?
1991 or something like that.
150,000 naira,
yes.
1991.
Yes, to start
just
the
to
board.
put it in context.
Yes, to start the board. And I was not even given a vehicle. I had my own car, which I was using privately as well as official car. Then Oyegun also introduced me. When I told him about the absence of craftsmanship, it was a little abstract to him. But I then said, the door was very good. And I said, who made this door? He told me the name of the gentleman who made it. And I said, please, can I have a word with him? The person came over and I said, it's one engineer, Obaze. So I said, Mr. Obaze, the design of the door, which was made of wood, Masonia wood. And I said, can you replicate this door as wall inside this office? The man was like, that would be too monotonous, that's crazy, it would be too expensive. And you already told me you don't have money. Anyway, he and I went to his workshop and we did a prototype of the wall that I like to see. And because I participated in it, I knew the cost. So I knew I could accommodate it within the little budget that I had. And before you know it, we had a very good office, which was my office. And it is still there till today, and I think it is second to none in that part of the world. And several people have come to look at it, and they have gone to duplicate it and replicate it in their own places. And the man who did it, Obaze, has made a lot of money doing offices for people.
Fun fact, Engineer Obaze was one of the people who built.
Oh, who built this house?
Yes, yes. Wow. He and my brother, the relationship later
transcended
personal, and my brother, my immediate younger brother, the only brother I have alive, he and him combined to actually build this house. Of course, they spent the whole week building it. I spent the weekend pulling it down.
Demolishing whatever they did.
You know, and yes, so that was there. Of course, we brought a lot of innovation. Because at that time, the British had left us on our own. And the old craft certificate that we used to have had to be integrated with the national policy on education in Nigeria. And I was thinking, how do we do this? So I had several workshops with various professional colleagues, and we came up with a very innovative approach to craft education and craft certification, so much so that Ireland came here to Nigeria to learn what we are doing. India invited me to come and consult for them in doing their own, and up to today, Nigeria is still building on it, but the foundation was laid at that time. As Segun said the other time, I don't know why it was not me that has this furniture workshop, that workshop that can produce this and that can produce that. I missed that. I lost out on that. I also lost out on I had lots of journal articles, lots of policy ideas, but it did not trickle down to hands-on, which I would have loved. And I don't know whether I'll be able to relive this life. I doubt it, though.
So, sir, and this is a very strong point you are passing across to our viewers, and that is to say that, and it's so important because, there's always this Cold War, unspoken war between academic and academic theories and practical. And this is what you're saying, that many times the theories that it always started with the theory, right? These theories that we write, are superficial, but then...
Abstract.
Yeah, they're abstract. But then there needs to be the application of those theories, and adjustment and the tweaks to then be able to have it in practical. And I guess that's what you are saying, because that's the concept of Daddy now having craft, then going into the proper academia where he literally built the craft world into what we know now as a technical and vocational education and training, TVET, with the department you started in Abu Zara. So in Zara, was it that there was none of that department when you were in Zara?
It didn't exist. There was science education, which is the closest, but the application of it did not exist. Also, ABU did not have enough money to set it up. So I went to Kaduna Polytechnic and started discussion on how the two of us can partner to produce a degree holder to teach the craft that they are involved in, the craft education they are involved in, plus the pedagogy that ABU was involved in. So again, I was the first in this country to offer a degree program in technical education, combining the practical skills at the Kaduna Polytechnic and the pedagogy at Ahmadu Bello University, which several institutions have now replicated.
And sir, later on in life, because we actually rode on the foundation you've laid. In the book, Never an Afterthought, and in several of the chapters where I talked about technical vocation reform, I stumbled onto technical vocation not because I read it in school or I'm also a craft myself, none, but it was from first-hand experience of now being a project manager on a site and experiencing the lack of competence. And that made me, and in fact, we had a site that literally had to shut. We shut the site because with the locals, we couldn't find, qualified professionals to work with us, artisans and technicians to work with us on that site, and had to come back to Lagos to recruit. And then even in Lagos, we were leaning mostly on the borders, of the Togo, the Beninois, and all of that. And that was what made me, after that project, that was what actually led me to wanting to understand how did we get it wrong and where did we go. Now, all of that I described in the book about the skill-up model, where the same thing you've talked about now, the pedagogy and the practical, I then was now saying industry was important, which is where Segun comes in, right? That we need to have this handshake. And I described in the book what we call I called it the skill-up bridge, the 5 fingers bridge. That there must be the handshake between industry, between the schools, which is academy, between the instructors, which is instructor training, the trainees themselves, and clearly the private sector. So those were, in my view, those 5 stakeholders that should make the bridge. But we just heard Daddy say that the fact that, so he learned a craft, he was able to combine the craft with pedagogy of learning, which is what you call academia, but then he wished he had continued to practice to have become the many obazes, in fact the Ainos of this world. And that's a concept
so
of...
he paid the ultimate price in pursuing the theory of achieving something good without being able to practice it himself. For me, on the other hand, I'm more interested in building or continuing the work of building that bridge. Look, it's very simple for me. If I have the benefit of being in industry or exposed to industry, and I translate or nitpick my needs in industry, take it back to the classroom with me, I can properly prepare the people in the classroom for where they're going. It's like walking from the answer backwards. Rather than teaching people, I mean, it's easy to say, it seems like it's supposed to be obvious. But if you take a typical academic who has been in academia for 35 years, for example, which then means they're a very experienced tutor. But by consequence, what that means is that they are deficient in the needs of industry.
True.
Because they've been away from the game for so long. So if nothing else in their work life exposes them to industry and the extant needs of industry, how good can we really say they are at transferring knowledge, not just abstract knowledge, transferring knowledge that is needed in industry? And by the way you stumbled on TVET is the same way I'm playing around in TVET too, not because I studied it in school, not because I'm working, but by association.
Exactly.
By having to review a lot of the stuff he does, reading it, going through it, and just by mere interaction, I'm on a mentorship in TVET. And I find my TVET knowledge comparable with things that I've studied theoretically. So if you have 2 people who have studied, one who has studied a particular field of study, say carpentry, in a school for 15 years, and you have somebody who has been a carpenter in practice for 15 years, who would you pick? It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer.
And this, so this again, sir, and I'm going to come to you, Daddy, because you are the, like they say, primus inter pares when it comes to TVET. Now, what you've just described is one of the challenges of our educational system. And in the last 10, 15 years, with all the seminars I know that you still participate in, I'm sure you would have seen the Finnish model, the Scandinavian, the German model, where what they describe our own system as a dead end. Because the example Segun just painted, 15 years practical carpenter, like a daddy's daddy, right? Who knows it, who understands it. Daddy didn't, when he was talking about materials planning, he didn't learn the course, materials
That's quantity
planning.
surveying now.
Quantity surveying, yeah. You know, he didn't learn the course, right? It was practical from experience. And then you then have 15 years, someone who learned it in school, right? In Polytechnic and all that. But sir, the one in Polytechnic is able to rise because we recognize it in our qualification framework. But the 15 years man who chooses to say, you know what, this thing where then they learn for the school, I won't go learn them. Unfortunately, sir, there is no assessment for this 15 years practical man to be able to say, okay, this is where you range. And so you should be able to go in, maybe your 15 years should equate to OND, and then you can go in for higher studies. That's why they describe our education system as having a dead end.
Yes. As a matter of fact, that's where we ended up when I was leaving NAPTEP. We decided that it was not enough to count the number of years of your schooling. What can you do with the knowledge and the skills? So, instead of having students to spend 3 years, you know, in a technical college, we broke the whole thing down into small bits, such that you can go to a technical college to learn a little aspect of skill and come out. As long as you take the language, the English, to communicate it,
literacy,
to discuss with your potential clients, and that is what NAPTEP is doing today, which is the beauty of the experience that we had in the past, which have now translated into modular, what we call modular knowledge, modular approach to technical education. That's what they are doing. You can now go into a technical college now and get certified after 3 months in a particular area. Now, it is also possible now for about 4 or 5 graduates of a technical college coming together with their different knowledges to form a cooperative, which I'm sure you came across in the US.
Yes.
And I recall my career, my short career in a secondary school in Kalamazoo, Loinorix Secondary School, where our students were building estates. These were part of class projects.
Exactly.
And they were selling these things. I don't know whether it's still there now. We started this thing I think it was in the late 60s or early 70s.
You know, they call them production hubs now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. At that time, we were calling it cooperative training. So, I have advocated that in some of my writings in this country, and unfortunately, it has really never gained the kind of prominence that we want. Yeah. But again, it is very simple. The reason is very simple. Those who make decisions in government don't understand what you are saying. We did not realize this. Also, we lack the ability. Why can't they see it? And that's where in your book, where you are talking of communication is extremely important, because what you are trying to do really is to impose yourself, to superimpose your own thinking on other people. You have to have the skill to succeed in doing it. Like
so right now, I mean, this is really getting interesting, and I'm seeing your comments, especially because education touches every one of us. Yes. Even in a few episodes we've been talking about, I mean, I got a comment from one of our viewers a few episodes ago, Emmanuel K, who mentioned that the lack of our educational system being able to transcend to align with the realities of today is the reason why a lot of Nigerian students in public universities now have an extra year. because of the COVID-19 challenge. So we're going to take a short break. And when we're back, I'm going to we're going to draw out some corollaries. Segun mentioned he went to private education in the house of a professor, and the elder ones went to public school. So it would be good for Daddy to tell us what did he see in the decline, as he has begun to say, that made Segun go to a public school. That made Segun go to a private school instead of a public school. More when we come back. Yeah. Finally, for you all my readers and will-be readers, this is the book. As you read it, don't keep the lessons to yourself. Go, if you buy on Amazon, get on Amazon, go share some reviews, because from your reviews, every other person gets to learn and is encouraged to buy. So I'm not really about the sales per se, but really more about you sharing your life, your lessons, or the impact of the book on you. Also, for those of you who are very active on social media, please do a thread. When you've read it, you see what I do when I pick up books I read, I do a thread on it, as I'm currently doing with the Colin Powell book titled It Worked For Me. So for this book as well, please, whatever you've learned from it, do a thread on social media. We would also invite you to come back to the dedicated website where you also ordered the book, especially those of you in Nigeria. Why am I saying that? I want to engage with you. If you have a different thought, if you have something you want to share, even if you oppose something or anything I may have said in the book, please engage with me. It's a lifestyle, it's a journey, and I want to share this journey with you. Yes, guys, welcome back to the concluding section of conversation on intergenerational conversation and that I've been having with Prof. Olu Aina and Dr. Segun Aina. It's been an awesome time, and I hope that you all have also been getting something to go home with. As you know, if you're just joining us, remember our hashtag, the Never an Afterthought hashtag that we use to continue these conversations across our social media channels: Twitter at NAA_book, Facebook and Instagram at NAA Afterthought, and last but not the least, you can always drop me a note at any time, podcast at neveranafterthought.com. And yes, we are reading your comments, and you notice as well that we're gleaning some of your comments even in our conversation. Well, we're trying to coast to a close. We know this has started. We started this last episode, and we're continuing this episode. But we're trying to coast to a close right now in this conversation. And what we're trying to do in the next few minutes is really to draw the corollaries. And as we draw the corollaries, really then leave every one of us, our viewers, with what becomes our take home. For some of our policy, those of us who are in policy making, active governance at any level, I'm sure from the wisdom of Prof. Olu Aina, who have been pioneers in this work and haven't handed over the baton now to us, we'll also pick certain things that we can adjust, and we'll get to coast. But so I was mentioning before the break, we're all talking about how it all comes together. The world of work and the world of pedagogy, the academic world, really they don't stand. Both of them must work together. They must come together in the pursuit of a complete human being. Really, that's the reality. And so you find that for that also, these intergenerational conversations become critical because the seamless handshake, the pursuit of the seamless handshake, means that each and every one of us must learn to look at the world from each other's prism. I think that's perhaps the binding lesson we're taking away. But as we coming to a close, as we're wrapping up, I want to bring up a few things, and I'm going to point to Daddy in a minute before I go back again to Segun. But Segun had mentioned that he went his primary and secondary education were private. That was private education. versus your generation, which everything you told us about was about a missionary and public school. Even the generation of his own elder siblings were also somewhat of public. But here we are, by the time it was his own time, I also would admit, my father, Joe Imoukhuede, at the time, every one of us, and I was the last of his child, but I also know that I got the last of the best of Federal Government College Warrior at the time, being a public school. Every one of us went to public school. So I imagine if my dad had any child in Segun's generation, that conversation may have changed. What's responsible for, since we have you alive and well, just walk us through what happened, why that decision changed.
Well, I think I would say things just happened naturally. Among the older children, when the older children were going to school, the schools were very stable. You could predict when your child will finish and when he will be ready to go to the next one. Segun also alluded to the fact that maybe it also has to do with more resources getting available as we were moving on with life. In his own time, we also started having enough resources to see that there are alternative ways of getting things done. In the private schools, you could predict when your child will finish. You could modularize the education and his own siblings at that time benefited from that. That situation. That's why I said things just happened naturally. I must also say that among the older children, PhD was not really the end thing at that time. But by the time it came to his own turn, not only that PhD was getting fashionable, it was also becoming necessary depending on the career that you choose. So these are part of the reasons that account for something happening in a particular way at a particular time and happening in a different way at another time.
So that is, thank you. But I think I want to stick on the stability one because really that's the issue. And your generation also has a big part to play in ensuring this stability that unfortunately you now began to see decline.
Yes.
As
they presided over it. They presided over the decline.
Exactly. They presided over the decline. So
if it did not happen, you will not learn from it. That's the way I like to see it.
But sir, so are we then? So because that brings me to one conversation that Segun and I have had before, to say that this intergeneration, because when we say inter, the word inter just means there's a connect. Is your generation, as the eldest of our generations, right, the traditionalists, are we creating the room for a seamless handshake that should guarantee the stability? But we're not seeing the stability, we're seeing the decline. So,
unfortunately, I wish I could say we are, but certainly we are not. I think the value system has changed and it keeps changing. The pursuit of wealth, the pursuit of money now predominate lifestyle. In our own, people wanted to make name. They wanted to hear of the Ainas, they wanted to hear of the Imoukhuedes. And it is not as if that's what they were pursuing deliberately, but that's what was happening in their own, in that time. So I would say my generation contributed significantly to this decline that we are talking about. Maybe it was not I mean, I won't say it was planned that way.
Yeah.
You know, it was not premeditated, but that was what was happening.
Another thing that exists, sorry to butt in, is that whilst the older generations presided over the decline, admittedly, maybe not deliberately, the older generation seems to think that they are the only ones that can fix it. And they are not recording any remarkable success in fixing the situation.
Fixing it, yes.
And yet, they still cling on to control.
Yes.
Admittedly, the people of my own and our own generation who have been given an opportunity to even participate in the conversation have also performed
mess up
dismally.
We have messed up.
We learned from the best.
So we became better messer up.
But you know, the decline is, unfortunately, we haven't had good ambassadors for the younger generations, to be perfectly honest. But the older generation also seems to feel that they have all the answers and they have all the solutions.
Yes.
And the honest truth is that times have changed. Things have moved on. And it is only a few individual people in the older generation who have really moved with the times and aligned themselves with the now.
Yes. That's why in Nigeria you see a 70-year-old man wanting to contest a governorship election. To do what? You know, although you can also say that while Obama at a young age became president of the United States, Joe Biden at close to 80 is also, I mean, is a president of the United States today.
Sir, because their own value system is driven by competence rather than other sentiments like age, tribe, race, and co. Gowon was head of state at 31.
Yes.
I'm already older than 31 now.
Yes.
He was the head of the whole country.
Yes.
So
although he was a military man, at that time, whoever has the longer gun,
but sir, there were other people with longer guns at the time. Everybody fell in line once it was returned to real.
So I think that because one of the things, and always having our viewers in mind as we have these conversations, and particularly about what they can take home and what they can work with. I like the fact that I'll come to Daddy at some point, because Daddy also exhibited some constraint in you coming back to Nigeria when you did. But I like the fact that you were telling us that in your choice, your constraint of choice, even when you wanted to lecture, you saw the relevance and the reason for you to go into the public sector than again the private sector. Yes. So I like that, you know, and that begins to build what we call building the hope, right? That everyone so desperately needs, and especially every Nigerian youth. But what can you, how can you put this all together, you know, for that young boy, young girl, you know, even anyone, for our viewers, basically? So
for me, we've here today and in the previous episode, we've said pursue academic knowledge and academic accolades. We've also said practicalize. And there are times where you cannot do both. To put a further spanner in the works, let me add a third dimension. There are things that you don't learn from practicalizing a trade and things that you do not learn from academic pursuit that are integral to you doing well as a whole. Soft skills. How do you communicate effectively? Life skills, you know, which is something I know you worked a lot on. What are the fundamental values that exist? You know, where I don't really like when I read books and hear speeches about successful people and they tell you abstract things like wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning if you want to be successful. What if you wake up at 4 a.m. and you're faffing around? Be truthful. Have integrity. Prof taught us that a good name is worth more than silver or gold. Imbibe that, regardless of your generation. You know, communicate effectively. It is. I learned from him the first time that I used to use the word couple to mean a few things. So I'll be there in a couple of minutes, and he always used to say, "Will you be here in 2 minutes?"
Exactly.
Communicate with specificity. You know, speak to what it is that you mean. Say something, do it, talk and do, which is what has kind of helped me personally in my own journey because I'm perceived to be a solution-driven person that says something and does it. And I touched on something that's also important, perception. Do all the hard work in the world. If you are not being perceived to be doing well, it doesn't count for as much.
So perception is not reality, but perception drives.
Perception drives. And if you are a bad person and you can package yourself, then you will get through. So we have instances where people who are not worth certain opportunities are being exposed to those opportunities, and the real people who aren't. So in building a well-rounded person and a well-rounded participant in society, there's a lot to do. I've had first-class students where I call them into presentations and they cannot communicate properly. And I know these guys are smart. Smarter than me even, but they cannot communicate. And I have people who can talk up a storm and they don't know anything. So it is about trying to find the balance. So for me, what I would say is if I were to summarize everything we are trying to say, from one generation to another, from practical to theory, it's balance. Just find that balance between all the multiple aspects that need to be considered.
Thank you. Daddy, as a son of a traditionalist myself, I cannot speak a proverb in your presence. But there's that proverb, so I want you to be the one to say the proverb. But there's that proverb that in English it talks about knowing how to wash your hand well so that you can dine with elders. So that is about so that, because that's where I want to kind of lead the conversation with you, sir. Yes, sir.
The Yoruba say, "Entuba mowowe abagbaje." In other words, if you can wash your hands clean, you'll be able to dine on the same table with elders, because no elder will allow you to sit down with him and begin to eat if you have not washed your hands. Now, I think Segun summarized it very well. A few things should be in any society, even I would say even in the animal kingdom, that we are probably lost value. And I must also say, even though I'm not a priest, the place of religion, which played significant part in my own growing up, culture, elders have their own places, younger ones have their own places. But a situation where I think there is so much confusion in the society today because of lack of focus. And I'm not challenging
his definition of focus.
being multitask, each of these things have their own places. And a little bit of everything will converge to improve the quality of life, in my opinion. And there should be nothing, no matter how small, should be discarded.
I mean, sir, and that's so true, because that proverb that Daddy quoted, I mean, I can't remember how many times, of course, from my own traditionalist influence of my father, my great-grandmother, and granny, and everyone that I wrote about in the book, even up to my Sisi that we all call Sisi from the thing. She was a traditionalist generation too. But the point is that actually speaks to prism, because like Daddy said, the elders are about cleanliness. In their own generation too, they said cleanliness is next to godliness. So before any elder sits on the table, and I'm just trying to visualize and practicalize it so that we all can relate, they would wash, there's washing, there's the water, to wash your hands, and not hand sanitizer. And so you see, when we talk about the how to mitigate against corona, it's been with us since ages. They wash their hands. Now, if anyone is coming to that table, you must know that that's the principle to follow. Now, it's the same way, and it works both ways. And I think that to mitigate against the confusion that is talking about, where Rolls Royce, where B2 wants to be a Rolls Royce, or where a Camry, wants to be you know, wants to be a Lexus, right?
Poma wants to be meat.
Yeah, you know, exactly, you know, to really mitigate against that crisis, it really behooves us to foster a seamless handshake. And I think that our traditionalists, our elders, really have a role to play. Bad enough that, yes, they oversighted the decline, and like Segun says, still believe they have the answer to fix it. I mean, Donald Trump said, I alone can fix it. It was the traditionalist generation. I ain't gonna fix shit. My friends.
They don't have the answer,
you know, I think the point is, but you see, whilst Biden too is a traditional generation, but what's the difference? He didn't say I alone can fix it. He brought in intergeneration. You can see from his cabinet pick, intergeneration, interracial, everything inter.
Balance.
Because the balance. Because the answer is in the balance. And I think that's the big takeaway. And that's the concept of the prism that I shared at the beginning of this show last episode. Again, if you didn't watch or you didn't join us last episode, you really must go watch last episode. Now, I'm not saying this because the views are good, but you must really watch it to be able to flow, right? And that's the prism. Because, Segun, there was a narrative you gave about your own younger sister that is even Gen Z.
Yes.
So you see, Daddy was really very busy, you know,
active.
from baby boomer to Gen X to Millennial and Gen Z, right?
Yeah.
And I want you to give that analogy of how the same message that Daddy will speak to you, and you will do it differently. Daddy will speak to Funke, and Funke will do it differently. Obviously expressing different generations, but because of the lack of failing for one generation to see the other way. So
I gave an analogy earlier off camera where I said if my dad were to refer me for a job opportunity and he says, oh, contact my friend for this job opportunity, I would typically either ask my dad to call the friend so I can speak with his friend, or I will call the friend and say, good afternoon, Sama. My dad said, I should speak to you. When can I come and see you? As Yorubas will say, Ojulo Rowa. Whereas my Gen Z younger sister would probably look up my dad's friend's number on WhatsApp and send him a message. Hi, good afternoon, sir. My dad said I should see you about a job, and proceed to say everything she wants to say on WhatsApp. There are differences. Some people type the messages in bits, some type it as one long message and send. But it is not with ill intent.
But look at the perception. Now, the person that both you and Funke are sending the message to are of either baby boomer generation or my generation, Gen X. And like Daddy said, he will look at it, what's wrong with Kilon Shomode? And what's wrong with this? What's wrong with this girl?
On the other end, I have people who are traditionalists in their thinking who call me up now and say, Orowa, when can I come and see you? And I'm like, guy, why are you trying to tie me down? Just say what you want to say, and can we talk about it over the phone? And they feel coming to see somebody is an expression of the importance of it. Now, this doesn't take away from other business concepts where you can pass across your seriousness and your level of commitment by
virtual meets
or physical meets. Even a Gen Z, given the right conditions, will still fly 10 hours for a face-to-face meeting that they could have had over Zoom, just to demonstrate
the seriousness.
That seriousness and commitment. But that speaks to something slightly different than what we're discussing in this context.
But the point, yes, sir.
I shared a text message with you about 2 weeks ago.
Yes, sir.
The daughter of a relation of mine sent me a text and said, I just took the examination conducted by the Osun State government for the recruitment of teachers. And I gave the score. He said, my mommy said, you know the governor, please tell him to fix me up. And
And he came to me with a message and he was like,
I said,
what is going on?
So I just sent a message back to the girl. I said, yes, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. And you know the biggest irony? His sarcasm will be lost on her.
Exactly. She won't get it.
Sarcasm will be lost on her.
And so the point, but the whole point is this lack of prism is the point I'm saying.
Yes.
If she just understood for a second, okay, yes, daddy knows the governor because the governor respects daddy, right? And the traditionalist generation. But how does his generation value communication, respect, empathy, for example?
Culture.
Just that 5 seconds split, just get out of yourself, get out of your own prism and put on someone else's prism, settles the whole thing.
Yes.
You would then realize. Yeah.
I'm tempted to say something, but I hope it doesn't spin off into a conversation that takes long. But another differential in generation is if I were to be your relative, and I am in a sense, and you were to have an opportunity to refer me for a job that you knew I was qualified for, I think you would do it with ease.
Yes.
With their own generation, as we are speaking today, if a position opened up that Prof knew I was qualified for, he would look for the second most qualified person, particularly if it was something that he, or a place where he had some control.
In fact, I remember that. And I was going to ask Daddy, I know we're closing, but I was going to say, Daddy, I wasn't going to let you go without this concept of your traditionalist generation, because I saw it a lot with J. Imoukhuede. I mean, he will not refer his children, his biological children, to anything. He'll be like,
So they are looking at the ethics of it.
If you're good enough for it, you will go compete with every other person. I'm like, what do you mean go compete with every other person? You know how to pull the strings. Pull the strings. At least I'm qualified for it.
Donald Trump employed his daughter.
At least I'm qualified for it. So, Daddy, what is is it that the British taught you people that? What exactly is it? Because we're not saying that Segun or me or anybody is not qualified now.
It's bad behavior under the guise of professional ethics.
I think it's more of the ethics. Why must you want to convey a certain advantage on your own child instead of throwing him? If he gets it by competition, perception also comes in. When your child gets that job, how are people? How will you escape the feeling that it is because he is your child? So I think it, and again, I think it comes naturally. Because, I mean, I was head of an examination body in this country for about 10 years, during which most of them were ripe for university education. I never talked to the registrar of JAM about admission for any of my children.
My sister spent an extra year at home in great agony.
Take the exam again next year.
Meanwhile, there are many other people that may come to you and say, okay,
I
put the word in.
Exactly. I put a word in. And I don't know. I think it's also it confers some satisfaction on people like me that I have done the right thing.
Well, so in our own generation, I think for me, what I look out for is the competence.
Yeah.
Once you have the competence, once you can compete favorably anywhere and everywhere else, well, I'll put the word in.
You put the word in.
I'll put the word in. But the whole point is, I'm not asking you to tweak anything to favor him or her, yes. But once you can put the word in, you can put, And
on the other side, it is important that you know that when somebody puts a word in for you, with that comes great responsibility.
Oh, yes.
Which you must
live up to.
Live up to and treat with deference to whoever it is that referred you.
Yeah.
One of my uncles, who coincidentally is also Dr. Segun Aina, I had a student who I referred to him for an internship. And getting an internship with him is a pretty big deal. And the student got the internship and then decided for whatever reason that they didn't want to take it. The professional thing to do would have been to either let him know or come through me to say, I can no longer take this opportunity. My guy decided to say he had a running stomach and then, went home and, they started calling him, he never just picked up. And that is something that is awash in our generation. Bad professional behavior is awash in our generation.
So I think in closing, charity, they say, begins at home. Yes. And for each and every one of us watching, home, we all know what our definition of home is. And meaning, therefore, that we all have a responsibility. I think there were two things we said broadly at the beginning, that we wanted to look at the prism and say that each and every one of us should take that minute out to see from what prism is the other generation looking at it, and where you cannot relate with it, then get those who can relate. I shared in an earlier episode, how did I take decisions? How did I become a friend of the younger ones, right? Or they call me king of boys or whatever it is that they've heard in several colloquies. Exactly. It was simple. I made friends with younger folks. In fact, that's the way to stay young. For those of you who are younger than me and you're all looking older than me, that's the way to stay young. Make friends with the younger folks. And but that's what I did. And with their relationship, try to understand things from their perspective. And as much as I would want to create a balance or one way or the other, I could be strong on certain things and like, no, that's bad behavior. Don't come and package it for me in any other way. Bad behavior is bad behavior. But yes, I understand this, therefore we will do this. So that we did, I did at that time. And I think we can borrow a leaf or two from it. And nobody is alienated from that. Our older generation, our younger generation, we all must borrow that leaf. We all must borrow that prism. And that way, once we can interchange that prism, I think we will then begin to get a result of some type of a seamless, handover. And really, our elder generation should not believe that they are the only ones who can fix it. I think Donald Trump has shown us that they can't fix nothing. And our stories in Nigeria also abound. So without any name calling, I think it's important that we embrace intergenerational. Now, in Nigeria, some of the things we won't discuss, we have choice constraint. In fact, we almost have no choice anymore. And that would be my answer to all that is going on around us, all the issues, whether it's banditry, whether it's criminal, whether it's, whether it's rebel, whatever choice of word we are using now to describe criminality. Criminality is criminality. But I just think that intergenerational conversations, interracial conversations, intertribal conversations, interreligious conversations, religion conversations, all of this are very critical to really building the empathy that we require to solving some of our issues. And I think the last point was I asked at the beginning, what remains consistent and universal across all these generations? And I think it has come out from our conversation. Value system. Value system. Truth is truth, whether you are Gen Z or Gen A. Truth is truth. Integrity is integrity. I said it in earlier episodes. Whether you're in London, integrity is integrity. You're in Nigeria, integrity is integrity. So whether you are Gen Z or Gen X, integrity is integrity. You don't need to borrow a prism to know integrity. Integrity is integrity. Character is character. Diligence is diligence. We said now, hard work and smart work. A combination of both. But diligence is diligence. Grit is grit, regardless of the generation. I mean, that's one word that has appeared across multi guests, in our conversation. So I think for me, that sums it all up. Clearly, I want you all to give a round of applause to our audience. I want everyone to do the clap. It's having Daddy over this last, 2 hours, across several episodes. it's no mean feat. And so, Daddy, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Ẹ ṣé gan-an, sir. Àmàrí yín bá o, àgbà yín á túbọ̀ dalẹ̀ o, lágbára Ọlọ́run, sir. Yes, sir. And Shegelu, you know how we do it now. Shake and see intergeneration. You know how do shit. You know. So until join me again next episode. You know the time. It's every Thursday at 6 p.m. West African time. Some of you have asked me, why do I always put that WAT? Because we have global audience. I shared with us the fact that we have audience in UK, audience in across Europe, audience America and Canada, in Dubai. I mean, so it's important. WAT is not an acronym of it, it's West African time. So every Thursday, 6 p.m. West African time, join us again for another exciting episode for this. Till then, stay safe, so you can keep well, and above all, keep winning. God bless you.